Have you ever wondered what happens when the path ahead must be walked alone? When the companionship you've relied on for decades is no longer there to share your burdens, celebrate your joys, or simply help you remember where you put your reading and glasses? Today, we're going to have an honest conversation about one of life's most challenging transitions, navigating the later years of life independently. Nothing explains this better than the story I'm about to tell you. Before we continue, what's one unspoken lesson you've learned after turning 55 or 60? We'd love to read it in the comment section. The story begins like this. I'm Claire Wilson, a social worker at Oakwood Community Center, where for the past 5 years I've had the privilege of leading a support group called Solo Navigator. Our members come from all walks of life, but they share one common experience. They're facing their senior years alone, whether through widowhood, divorce, estrangement, or having never married. Today is special because it marks our 5th anniversary. And our members have agreed to share their most valuable insights with you. Look around this room with me for a moment. The walls are lined with photos from our previous meetings, moments of connection, occasional laughter, and yes, sometimes tears. These images tell stories of resilience, but they also reflect the harsh realities that are rarely discussed openly about aging independently. As much as we celebrate independence, there are truths about this journey that deserve acknowledgement. What you'll learn today isn't just theory or well-meaning advice from someone who hasn't walked this path. Instead, you'll hear directly from those living this reality every day. They'll share 7 harsh truths about aging alone, not to frighten you, but to prepare you. More importantly, they'll reveal the strategies they've developed to navigate these challenges with dignity and purpose. Before we begin, I want you to know that whether you're watching this because you're currently aging alone, preparing for that possibility, or supporting someone who is, the insights shared today will help you approach this journey with clearer eyes and stronger tools. Let me introduce you to our group members who have courageously agreed to share their experiences. Today, Jackson Carter is 72, a retired accountant who lost his wife of 45 years to cancer. His meticulous nature served him well professionally, but he's learning that life alone rarely follows a predictable spreadsheet. Next to him is Wesley Pierce, 80, a retired naval officer who never married. His military career took him around the world, but his recent health challenges have shown him that even the most self-sufficient person needs support systems. Ruby Mitchell, 75, built a successful small business from the ground up and has been widowed for a decade now. Her entrepreneurial spirit remains strong, but the technological landscape keeps shifting under her feet. Eliza Harmon is 68, a former elementary school teacher whose divorce and subsequent estrangement from her only child created voids where family traditions once lived. And finally, Bennett Cooper, 67, who retired early due to health issues and has navigated 2 divorces. His journey has taught him that safety takes on new dimensions when you're the only one noticing potential hazards in your environment. As our group settles into their chairs, there's a palpable mix of determination and vulnerability in the air. Today isn't about sugarcoating the challenges of aging alone. It's about facing them squarely, understanding them deeply, and developing practical strategies to navigate them successfully. Thank you all for being here. I begin making eye contact with each member, and thank you especially for your willingness to share your experiences with others who might benefit from your hard-earned wisdom. Shall we begin with our first truth? Jackson nods, straightening his posture as he prepares to share his story. The room grows quiet, and our journey into these seldom discussed realities begins. Jackson clears his throat, his hands resting on his knees as he begins to share. The first harsh truth I've learned about aging alone is that financial vulnerability increases exponentially when you're on your own, he says, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. After Martha passed, I thought I had everything figured out financially. I'd been an accountant my entire career after all. He pauses, a wry smile crossing his face. Then last winter, during that terrible storm, my roof partially collapsed. The repair cost was $15,000, an amount that would have been manageable when there were two incomes or even when Martha was here and we had planned for such emergencies together. But on my single fixed income, that one expense nearly depleted. My emergency fund. The room is quiet as Jackson continues. What I wasn't prepared for was how quickly financial security can unravel when you're alone. Every expense falls on one set of shoulders. There's no one to split the property taxes with, no one to share utility bills or grocery costs. And when a major expense hits, there's no second income or second perspective to help manage it. How did you handle it, Jackson? I ask. Knowing his experience reflects what many seniors face. I had to make choices I never imagined I'd need to make, he admits. Delayed some medication refills, cut back on fresh produce, turned the heat down, lower than was comfortable. For the first time in my life, I had to choose between home repairs, health needs, and basic comfort. That's a reality of aging alone that took me by surprise, despite my financial background. I turn to the group and then to you, our viewers. What Jackson is describing is something many people don't anticipate when planning for their senior years. When living alone, your financial margin for error shrinks dramatically. Without a partner to provide a second income or to share expenses, your vulnerability to financial shocks increases. The financial reality of aging alone isn't just about having enough saved. It's about navigating an economic landscape designed for couples or families while standing alone. Every financial decision carries more weight because there's no safety net of a partner's income or resources. This requires a different approach to financial planning than most conventional advice suggests. Would you mind sharing some of the strategies you've developed to address this, Jackson? I ask. Jackson nods, his posture straightening as he shifts from problem to solution. The most important thing I've learned is to build multiple layers of financial safety nets, not just one emergency fund. I now have 3 separate funds, one for home repairs, one for medical emergencies, and one for unexpected daily expenses. I've also connected with a financial advisor who specializes in single seniors. She helped me restructure my investments to provide more consistent monthly income and less vulnerability to market swings. And perhaps most importantly, I've become much more proactive about maintenance for my home, my car, even my health, because preventing emergencies is much less expensive than responding to them. Several group members nod in agreement as Jackson concludes, being alone financially means I have to be more vigilant, more proactive, and more strategic than ever before. It's exhausting sometimes, but it's necessary. I thank Jackson for his candor before turning to Wesley, whose experience highlights our second harsh truth. Wesley, tall and dignified even at 80, adjusts his glasses before speaking. The second harsh truth about aging alone is that healthcare navigation becomes a solo burden, he begins. I spent my career making decisions for dozens of sailors under my command. I thought managing my own healthcare would be straightforward by comparison. He shakes his head slowly. 3 months ago, I was hospitalized with pneumonia. The illness itself was difficult enough, but what came after was even harder. I was discharged with 5 new medications, each with different schedules and side effects. I had follow-up appointments with 3 different specialists, but I couldn't drive for 2 weeks after my hospitalization. Wesley's voice grows quieter. I had to make critical decisions about my treatment while still foggy from medication. There was no one at home to help track my pills, remind me of doctor's instructions, or even just notice if I was getting better. Or worse, no one to drive me to appointments or pick up prescriptions. That sounds overwhelming, I acknowledge. How did you manage? At first, poorly, Wesley admits. with a frankness characteristic of his naval background. I missed doses, mixed up medications, and nearly returned to the hospital. What saved me was swallowing my pride and creating a system. I set up multiple daily alarms on my phone for medications. I arranged for grocery and pharmacy delivery. Services. I found a medical transportation service covered by my insurance. Wesley looks around the room. But the hardest part was making those critical healthcare decisions entirely alone. When the pulmonologist suggested an ongoing treatment with significant side effects, there was no spouse or child to talk it through with, no one to help research alternatives or simply provide a second opinion from someone who cares about me. Personally, I nod, turning to address you directly. Wesley's experience highlights something crucial about aging alone. The cognitive and emotional labor of managing your healthcare falls entirely on your shoulders at precisely the time when you might be least equipped to handle it due to illness or age-related challenges. This isn't just about having someone to drive you to appointments, though that practical support matters tremendously. It's about navigating complex medical systems and making life-altering decisions without anyone who shares a personal stake in your well-being. It's about advocating for yourself when you're at your most vulnerable, without a witness or ally in the room during medical consultations. What do you think about all this? Let me know in the comments below. Continuing, Wesley, what advice would you give to others facing this challenge? I ask. Build your healthcare support system before you need it, he says firmly. I now have a designated medical buddy, another veteran I met through a support group. We accompany each other to important appointments, take notes, and help each other understand treatment options. Neither of us has family nearby, but we've created our own support system. Wesley continues, I've also learned to use technology to my advantage. I record doctor's appointments on my phone with permission, so I can listen again when I'm clearer-headed. I use medication management apps and set up automatic prescription refills. And I've compiled an emergency medical information folder that paramedics or hospital staff can easily access if needed. His final point resonates around the room. Most importantly, I've learned to speak up clearly about my living situation to medical providers. Many assume you have built-in support at home, and their discharge instructions or treatment plans reflect that assumption. I now explicitly tell every provider, I live alone. I need to manage this myself. Please plan accordingly. As Wesley concludes, Ruby shifts in her seat, ready to share the third harsh truth. At 75, her stylish appearance and quick wit belie the challenges she's faced as a widow for the past decade. The third harsh truth about aging alone is that technology dependence becomes unavoidable, yet increasingly difficult, Ruby begins. I owned a successful boutique for 30 years. I handled inventory, payroll, taxes. I wasn't afraid of learning new systems, but the pace of technological change in recent years has been overwhelming, especially without in-home support. Her frustration is evident as she continues. Last year, my bank eliminated in-person tellers except by appointment. They directed everyone to use the app or online banking. For younger people or those with tech-savvy partners, this might be convenient. For me, it was a crisis. My financial independence was suddenly threatened not by lack of funds, but by lack of access. Ruby describes her attempts to learn the banking app, the tiny text she couldn't read, the confusing navigation, the security questions she struggled to track. The breaking point came when I got locked out of my account after many failed login attempts. The customer service representative suggested I just ask my grandson to help me. I don't have grandchildren, and my children live across the country with busy lives of their own. That must have felt incredibly isolating, I observe. It did, Ruby agrees. But it was also a wake-up call. I realized that technology isn't optional anymore. It's the primary way to access essential services. Banking, healthcare portals, grocery delivery, government benefits, connecting with family, all increasingly require digital fluency. And learning these systems is much harder when you don't have someone at home to help when you get stuck. I turn to our viewers. Ruby's experience highlights a growing challenge for many older adults living independently. As more services move, online digital literacy becomes necessary for maintaining independence. Yet learning and troubleshooting technology is particularly difficult when done alone, without the in-home support that many take for granted. The digital divide doesn't just separate generations, it creates particular vulnerability for seniors living alone. A spouse or housemate might share the burden of learning new systems or provide immediate help with technological challenges. Without that in-home support, technological barriers can quickly escalate from frustrating to functionally debilitating. Ruby, how have you addressed this challenge? I ask. She straightens in her chair, a determined gleam in her eye. I decided to be proactive instead of reactive. I enrolled in a digital literacy class specifically for seniors at our local library. I also joined a technology exchange program where high school students provide one-on-one tech support to seniors. My young partner, Zoe, visits twice a month to help with specific issues and teach me new skills. Ruby smiles as she adds, I've also learned to advocate for myself with companies. I now explicitly ask for senior-friendly alternatives when digital-only options don't work for me. Sometimes they exist, but aren't advertised. And when possible, I switch to businesses that still offer accessible human support without technological barriers. Her most practical advice draws nods from around the room. I've created a technology emergency list. Key people I can call when I'm locked out of accounts or can't figure out a critical update. Senior centers, libraries, community colleges, many offer tech support specifically for older adults. The key is identifying these resources before you're in a crisis situation. As Ruby concludes, Eliza shifts uncomfortably, steeling herself to share her experience. At 68, she's the youngest of our group, her teacher's articulate manner evident as she speaks. The fourth harsh truth about aging alone is that holiday seasons transform from joyful to emotionally challenging. Eliza begins, her voice catching slightly. After my divorce and estrangement from my son, I thought I was adjusting well to my new independence. I had my teaching career, friends, hobbies, but then came the first holiday season alone. The pain is still fresh, as she describes it. I'd always been the one who hosted Christmas. My home was where family gathered, the big tree in the corner, stockings hung with care, my grandmother's recipe for cinnamon rolls on Christmas morning. That first December alone, I put up decorations out of habit, but it felt like creating a stage set for a play where none of the actors showed up. Eliza pauses, collecting herself before continuing. I sat among decorations meant for family gatherings, surrounded by traditions that suddenly had no purpose. The contrast between the festive environment I'd created and the profound silence of my home was almost unbearable. I realized that holidays aren't just calendar dates, they're emotional landscapes we've navigated with others throughout our lives. When those others are gone, the familiar landscape becomes disorienting. Several group members nod in understanding as Eliza describes how holidays accentuate absence in a way ordinary days don't. Friends with families are wrapped up in their own traditions. Social invitations often come as pity gestures rather than genuine inclusion, and the cultural messaging around holidays, all those commercials with multi-generational families gathered around tables, serves as a constant reminder of what you no longer have. I acknowledge the weight of Eliza's words. Holiday grief is particularly challenging because it comes with such strong expectations of joy. Many people find that holidays intensify feelings of loss and loneliness when living alone. This isn't just about missing familiar traditions. It's about the collapse of structures that provided meaning and purpose during significant times of the year. For many, holidays were opportunities to express love and care through hosting, cooking, gift-giving, or creating special experiences. Without recipients for that care, holidays can transform from anchoring points in the year to times of heightened emotional distress. Eliza, how have you navigated this challenge? I ask gently. Her expression softens as she shifts to the present. I've had to consciously rebuild my relationship with holidays from the ground up. First, I gave myself permission to abandon traditions that no longer brought joy. I don't put up a large tree anymore. Instead, I have a small living Norfolk pine that brings greenery without the emotional baggage of ornaments collected over decades of family life. I've also created new traditions centered around community rather than family. I volunteer at a children's hospital on Christmas morning, reading stories to kids who can't be home for the holidays. I host a misfit Christmas dinner for other friends who are alone for various reasons. We've created our own unconventional celebration that acknowledges our circumstances rather than trying to replicate traditional family gatherings. Eliza's most poignant advice resonates deeply. I've learned to plan extensively for holidays. Empty time is the enemy. It allows grief and loneliness to expand. I now schedule meaningful activities throughout holiday periods, particularly on the most challenging days. And I've found it helpful to reframe my thinking. These aren't diminished versions of past holidays. They're different experiences entirely, with their own potential for meaning. As Eliza concludes, Bennett shifts forward in his chair, ready to share the fifth harsh truth. At 67, his early retirement due to health issues has given him a different perspective on aging alone. The fifth harsh truth about aging alone is that home safety hazards multiply without someone to notice them. Bennett begins, his voice steady, but serious. I've always been self-sufficient, fixed things myself, handled my own home maintenance. But last winter, I experienced something that shook that confidence to its core. Bennett leans forward, his expression grave. I was taking a new medication that affected my sense of smell. Unknown to me, my gas water heater developed a slow leak. For days, the gas was filling my home, but I couldn't detect it. No one was there to notice the smell, to see that I was becoming increasingly confused and lethargic, both symptoms of gas exposure. A chill seems to pass through the room as he continues. It was my mail carrier who saved my life. She noticed the accumulated mail and knocked on my door. When I answered, confused and disoriented, she recognized something was wrong and called emergency services. The fire department found gas levels that could have caused an explosion or been fatal with continued exposure. Bennett's story hangs heavy in the air. What terrified me wasn't just the gas leak. It was realizing how many safety hazards become more dangerous when you live alone. There's no one to notice changes in your behavior that might signal a health emergency. No one to spot maintenance issues before they become dangerous. No one to help if you fall or become suddenly ill. I nod, acknowledging the seriousness of Bennett's experience. What Bennett is describing is something many independent seniors discover. Our homes can harbor hidden dangers that are much more threatening when we face them alone. This isn't just about the expected challenges of aging, like navigating stairs or reaching high shelves. It's about how everyday environments become increasingly hazardous without another person to serve as a safety backup, to notice the stovetop left on, to hear you call for help after a fall, or to realize something is wrong when you don't follow your usual routines. Bennett, how have you addressed these safety concerns? I ask. He sits up straighter, shifting from vulnerability to practical advice. After my experience, I completely reassessed my home safety strategy. First, I installed interconnected smoke and carbon monoxide detectors with remote monitoring capability. If they detect a problem, they not only alert me, but also notify my emergency contacts and can call the fire department directly. Bennett continues, I also enrolled in a home safety evaluation program through my local area agency on aging. They identified numerous hazards I hadn't considered, from tripping risks to inadequate lighting in critical areas. I've systematically addressed each issue they identified. His most valuable insight draws nods from around the room. Perhaps most importantly, I've created multiple layers of human safety checks. I have 3 people, my neighbor, my cousin, and a friend from church, who I check in with daily via text. If they don't hear from me by noon, they call. If I don't answer, my neighbor has a key to check on me. This simple system creates human oversight without sacrificing my independence. Bennett concludes with a sobering but empowering observation. Living alone means I have to be much more intentional about safety than I would if sharing my home. It requires more planning, more systems, and more connections with others. But these efforts don't diminish my independence. They protect it by preventing the kinds of emergencies that could end it entirely. I thank Bennett for his candor before turning back to Ruby, who's ready to share our 6th harsh truth about aging. Alone. Ruby shifts in her seat, her expression thoughtful. The 6th harsh truth about aging alone is that decision fatigue becomes overwhelming with no one to share the mental load, she begins. This might sound trivial compared to financial or safety concerns, but its impact on quality of life is profound. She describes an experience that catches the group by surprise. 3 months after my husband died, I had a complete breakdown in the grocery store. I stood in the bread aisle, surrounded by more than 20 options, and suddenly burst into tears. A store employee found me sobbing over a loaf of sourdough. Ruby's candor elicits knowing nods from several group members. It wasn't about the bread, of course. It was about the crushing weight of making every single decision alone, from critical medical choices to household repairs to daily minutiae like what to eat and when to sleep. There was no one to share the mental burden, no one to consult or delegate to. Every choice, no matter how small, required my full attention and decision-making energy. That sounds exhausting, I acknowledge. It is, Ruby confirms. Humans aren't designed to make countless decisions in isolation. We evolved to share cognitive burdens within groups. When you live with someone, decisions are naturally distributed. One person might handle the finances while the other manages social plans. One remembers medical appointments while the other tracks home maintenance needs. She continues with insight that resonates around the room. When you're suddenly alone, all those decisions fall on one set of shoulders. Most people don't anticipate how mentally draining this aspect of solo living can be. It creates a form of cognitive overload that affects everything from your mood to your ability to make good choices about important matters. I turn to address our viewers directly. What Ruby is describing might seem like a minor challenge compared to other aspects of aging alone, but its impact on well-being can be substantial. Decision fatigue refers to the deteriorating quality of decisions after a long session of decision-making. When you live alone, particularly after years of shared decision-making, this fatigue can become chronic. This isn't just about feeling overwhelmed occasionally. Decision fatigue can lead to poor choices, procrastination on important matters, and a general decline in executive function. For seniors already navigating age-related cognitive changes, this additional burden can significantly impact quality of life and independence. Ruby, how have you managed this aspect of solo living? I ask. Her face brightens as she shares her strategies. I've developed systems to reduce unnecessary decision-making. I created a capsule wardrobe with items that all coordinate so I don't waste mental energy on daily outfit decisions. I established a rotating meal plan with shopping lists for each week of the month, eliminating daily decisions about what to eat. Ruby continues with practical wisdom. I've also learned to identify which decisions truly matter and which don't. I save my best mental energy for important choices about health, finances, and relationships. For less consequential matters, I've created default options or simple decision rules that I follow automatically. Her most innovative approach draws interested looks from the group. I've also assembled what I call my decision council. Different friends I consult for specific types of choices. Sarah helps with technology decisions, Michael advises on home repairs, and Elizabeth is my medical sounding board. None of them carries the full weight of decision-making with me, but each shares a small portion of the mental load in their area of strength. Ruby's final insight is both philosophical and practical. Most importantly, I've learned to be gentle with myself when decision fatigue hits. Sometimes the most self-compassionate choice is to postpone non-urgent decisions, temporarily simplify options, or even flip a coin when the stakes are low. Acknowledging the reality of decision fatigue has helped me develop healthier responses to it. As Ruby concludes, Jackson straightens in his chair, ready to share our seventh and final harsh truth about aging alone. The seventh harsh truth about aging alone is that identity shifts can be disorienting when previous roles disappear. Jackson begins, his voice reflective. For 45 years, I was Martha's husband. I was a provider, a father, a respected professional in my community. I knew exactly who I was and where I fit in the world. Jackson's expression grows distant as he continues. After Martha died and I retired, those identities vanished almost simultaneously. I wasn't a husband. I wasn't an accountant. I wasn't actively parenting adult children who had their own busy lives. The roles that had defined me and given structure to my days were gone. His vulnerability is evident as he describes the disorientation that followed. I remember standing in my kitchen one morning, coffee cup in hand, and thinking, who am I now? What purpose do I serve? It was more than grief or loneliness. It was a fundamental unmooring from my sense of self. I nod in recognition. What Jackson is describing is a profound challenge that many face when aging alone. Our identities are often constructed around relationships and roles. When those disappear through widowhood, divorce, retirement, or children moving away, we face the disorienting task of reconstructing who we are. This identity reconstruction happens at precisely the time when other aspects of aging are also challenging our sense of self. Physical changes, shifts in cognitive abilities, and evolving social networks all influence how we see ourselves and our place in the world. Without a partner who knew us in our previous roles and can help bridge past and present versions of ourselves, this transition can feel like navigating in the dark. Jackson, how have you addressed this challenge? I ask. His expression lightens as he turns to the present. It's been a deliberate process of both letting go and building anew. First, I had to acknowledge the grief not just for Martha, but for my former self. The identities and roles that could never be reclaimed in exactly the same way. Jackson continues with growing confidence. Then I began experimenting with new potential identities. I volunteered at a financial literacy program for teenagers, which allowed me to use my professional skills in a new context. I joined a widowers hiking group where I found community with others navigating similar transitions. I even took pottery classes, something I'd always been curious about but never had time to explore. His most meaningful insight resonates deeply with the group. I've learned that at this stage of life, identity becomes more internally generated than externally defined. Rather than deriving my sense of self primarily from relationships to others, husband, father, employee, I've developed an identity rooted in values, interests, and chosen communities. It's a more fluid, flexible sense of self that can adapt to the continuing changes that aging brings. Jackson concludes with hard-earned wisdom. Reconstructing your identity after significant loss is not a single event, but an ongoing process. It requires both courage to explore new possibilities and compassion for yourself during the disorienting transitions. But what emerges can be a self that is more authentic and resilient than the one defined primarily by external roles. As Jackson finishes speaking, a thoughtful silence falls over the group. The 7 harsh truths about aging alone hang in the air, not as sources of despair, but as realities that, once acknowledged, can be addressed with foresight and intention. What do you think about all this? Let me know in the comments below. Continuing, I look around at our group members, noting how sharing these difficult truths has created a palpable bond between them. Then Wesley, our oldest member at 80, breaks the silence with an unexpected vulnerability. "I need to admit something," he says, his military bearing momentarily softening. "After my hospitalization for pneumonia, when I was struggling to manage my recovery alone, I seriously considered giving up my independence. I was so overwhelmed by coordinating my own care that I looked into assisted living facilities, even though I wasn't physically ready for that level of support." His confession creates a pivotal moment in our conversation. "I felt like a failure," Wesley continues, "as if needing help somehow diminished me. But what I've come to realize through this group is that true independence isn't about doing everything alone. It's about creating systems and connections that allow you to live on your own terms." Ruby reaches over to squeeze Wesley's hand. "I've had those moments too," she admits. "When the technology challenges or decision fatigue hit hardest, I've wondered if living alone is sustainable. But like you said, the answer isn't all or nothing. It's about building the right supports around us." This spontaneous exchange reveals the emotional core beneath our practical discussion. Aging alone isn't just about navigating external challenges. It's about maintaining dignity and purpose while acknowledging human needs for connection and support. What you're all describing, I observe, is the delicate balance at the heart of aging independently. It's not about isolated self-sufficiency, but rather about creating interdependence on your own terms, building networks, systems, and relationships that support your autonomy rather than replace it. I turn to address our viewers directly. This is perhaps the most important insight from today's conversation. Independent aging doesn't mean facing these challenges alone. It means acknowledging the realities we've discussed and proactively creating strategies and connections that preserve your agency and dignity. The energy in the room shifts as we pivot from naming harsh truths to sharing resilience strategies. Each group member has developed approaches that have transformed their experience of aging alone, not by denying its difficulties, but by meeting them with creativity, foresight, and openness to new forms of connection. Let's take a few minutes to share the practices that have most helped each of you navigate these challenges, I suggest. What one strategy would you want others facing similar circumstances to know about? Jackson is the first to respond. For me, it's been community involvement, but with an important twist. Rather than just joining any available activity, I sought opportunities that leveraged my professional skills. Teaching financial literacy to young people gave me purpose in a way that generic socializing never could. It maintained a connection to my core identity while creating new relationships and meaning. Eliza nods in agreement. Along similar lines, I found that creative expression provided both connection and purpose. The writing group I joined wasn't just about socializing. It was about processing my experiences through poetry and memoir. Sharing my work with others who understand both the craft and the emotions behind it has been profoundly healing. Wesley shares his approach. I've found tremendous value in creating what I call specific purpose relationships, rather than seeking all-purpose companions. My medical buddy, my technology helper, my home maintenance contact. Each relationship serves a defined function, which actually makes it easier to ask for and receive help without feeling burdensome. Together, these connections create a network that supports my independence. Ruby builds on Wesley's point. I've embraced technology exchange with younger generations, not just receiving help with digital challenges, but offering my life experience. In return, my young tech partner Zoe helps me navigate online banking and video calls. In exchange, I mentor her on professional development and share cooking techniques from my generation. This reciprocity transforms what could be a dependent relationship into a mutually valuable exchange. Bennett offers his perspective. I've focused on environmental modifications, not just for safety, but for simplicity, redesigning my living space to reduce maintenance, improve accessibility, and incorporate smart home features has dramatically reduced the daily stress of living alone. These changes required upfront investment, but have created a home that supports rather than challenges my independence. Their collective wisdom points to a powerful conclusion. Resilience in aging alone isn't about denying vulnerability or achieving complete self-sufficiency. It's about creative adaptation, selective connection, and intentional preparation for the realities of solo living in later years. As our session draws to a close, I look around at the circle of faces, each marked by experience, each carrying stories far beyond what they've shared today. There's a different energy in the room now compared to when we began. The acknowledgement of these harsh truths hasn't diminished anyone. Rather, it seems to have reinforced their resilience and determination. Before we end today, I say, I want to thank each of you for your courage in sharing these difficult realities of aging alone. By naming them, you've removed some of their power to frighten or isolate. You've transformed personal challenges into collective wisdom that may help others prepare for their own journeys. The group members exchange glances, a silent recognition passing between them. Then, somewhat spontaneously, they rise and form a circle, standing shoulder to shoulder, a physical manifestation of the support they've found in acknowledging common struggles and sharing hard-earned strategies. What we've discussed today isn't about surrendering to isolation or fear, I continue, addressing both the group and you, our viewers. It's about preparation and adaptation rather than denial. The path of aging alone carries unique challenges. Yes, but also opportunities for deeper self-knowledge, unexpected connections, and newfound resilience, Jackson speaks up. When Martha died, I thought my life was essentially over. Now I realize it's simply different, with its own possibilities, for meaning and purpose if I'm willing to see them. Eliza nods in agreement. I've learned that acknowledging vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the first step toward creating the supports that allow true independence on my own terms. As our group stands together one last time, I turn to address you directly. The harsh truths we've shared today may be challenging to hear, especially if you're just beginning this journey of aging independently. But recognizing these realities isn't about surrendering to them. It's about facing them squarely so you can prepare effectively. The question now becomes, how will you apply these insights to your own life or to supporting someone you care about who is aging alone? Will you proactively address financial vulnerability by creating multiple safety nets and seeking specialized advice for single seniors? Will you build healthcare support systems before crisis strikes, identifying medical buddies and technology tools that can share the burden of complex care? Will you approach technology as an essential skill rather than an optional convenience, seeking appropriate resources to build digital literacy? How might you reimagine holiday traditions to find new sources of meaning and connection? What steps will you take to enhance home safety without sacrificing independence? Can you develop strategies to manage decision fatigue by creating systems and identifying which choices truly deserve your limited mental energy? And perhaps most fundamentally, how will you approach the reconstruction of identity as previous roles change or disappear? These aren't abstract questions. Your answers, whether for yourself or for someone you care about, will shape the experience of aging in profound ways. The difference between struggling in isolation and thriving independently often lies, not in circumstance, but in preparation, perspective, and connection. As our Solo Navigator group has demonstrated today, aging alone doesn't have to mean aging lonely or without purpose. By acknowledging these harsh truths, you take the first step toward transforming potential challenges into opportunities for growth and adaptation. By developing strategies like those our members have shared, you create a foundation for dignity and meaning in this important life stage. The circle of group members begins to disperse, but not before exchanging contact information and planning their next gathering. What began as a support group has evolved into something more, a community of individuals who understand one another's journeys in ways that others cannot. As they depart, I'm struck by the paradox at the heart of our discussion today. The path of aging alone requires more connection, not less, not dependence but interdependence, not isolation but intentional community built on one's own terms. The question I leave you with is simple but profound. What will you do today to prepare for tomorrow? How will you transform awareness into action? The harsh truths we've discussed won't disappear, but with foresight, creativity, and courage, you can meet them with confidence rather than fear. The journey of aging independently isn't about avoiding all difficulties. It's about facing them with open eyes and a prepared heart. And in that honesty, that preparation, lies the foundation for a dignity and purpose that no circumstance can diminish. Thanks for watching. Like this video if you learned something new. It helps us understand what content serves you best.